Hey there, just want to give you a little introduction of myself before we get in the class so you know a little bit about me. Um, so, um, I grew up in Michigan, so kind of the upper Midwest, in the Lansing area, so here in the kind of the palm of lower Michigan. If you go straight down to this little town called Eaton Rapids, that's where I grew up. It's a town of a few thousand people. So kind of out in the country, so to speak, in the farm fields of southern Michigan. And these are some um, photos of myself when I was little and cute. But when I got done with high school, I wanted to explore a little bit and get out of Michigan. And so I ended up at the University of Minnesota Morris. So here's a map. I'm going to move my face for a second. Here's a map of Minnesota. So this little town here on the far western edge of Minnesota is Morris, and so there's a small branch campus of the main University of Minnesota there. And it's out in the prairies, so this upper right picture is kind of what it looks like out in western Minnesota. But in my senior year, or kind of like end of my junior year, I really got interested in plants and decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to grad school. And so as part of my senior thesis, I spent a lot of time at this Glacial Lake State Park, which is pictured in the lower right here, and I reconstructed the fire history of that state park, taking lots of tree cores and looking for burn scars and aging them. And that was my senior thesis and what got me really interested in plants in general. So I ended up going to University of Idaho for my master's degree. I was in the Department of Forest Resources there. And if you knew me at the time, that probably would seem weird that I ended up in Idaho, because I hadn't thought about Idaho really very much in my life. But this person pictured here was a good friend of mine from high school. This is Andy, and he went to Idaho the year before I did. And the only reason Andy went there is because he played a lot of video games, and especially NCAA basketball. And he always played as the Idaho Vandals because he loved the nickname. And so when Andy decided to go to grad school, he picked it because he had played them as a video game team. So not the best reason to end up at University of Idaho, but that's how it happened. And so when Andy was there, I was looking for grad schools. He said, "Hey, you should come out here. It's amazing. I love it out here." And so I for also fairly poor reasons went to University of Idaho, but I loved it there. Had a great advisor and really enjoyed my time there. I worked after that. I worked for one other thing. So I guess I was going to mention the some of the projects we did when I was there in grad school. Here I am climbing a tree. We did some work looking at how the physiology of trees differed within an individual canopy. So the leaves in the upper part of the canopy behave a little different from those in the lower part of the canopy. And so we were measuring and quantifying that as part of my master's degree. At the end of my master's degree is when I met my now wife. So this is Sunny. We met, I guess, in my last year of Idaho, ended up getting married, and we moved to Oregon State. And I started my PhD at Oregon State, but we had our first daughter, Quinn, fairly soon after we moved there. And I just decided I wanted to take a break from schooling and be a parent and do some other stuff. So what I did is I worked for the Ameriflux network. A picture of one of the sites of the Ameriflux network is shown here. And it's a network of sites all across the U.S. that measure the fluxes of mainly carbon and water and then energy above plant canopies. And what they do is they can basically estimate how much carbon is entering or leaving an ecosystem and how much water is entering or leaving. And that way this is where a lot of our estimates of carbon budgets of ecosystems come from. And so I traveled around to a lot of these sites and calibrated the instrumentation as part of my job. At the end of our time in Oregon, we had our second daughter, Siri. So this is our first one named Quinn. We had Siri. And then not too long after that, I decided I wanted to finish grad school and get my PhD so I could teach and be a professor. And so I had an opportunity to go to Kansas to do that. And at Kansas, I was able to work full-time and get my PhD. which I wouldn't advise to anybody, but it worked out for us in the situation. But it was a big switch because I had been working in forested ecosystems. So in Kansas, I worked on grasses. I was interested in drought tolerance of grasses and what makes some plants able to tolerate drought and others not. And in the meantime of studying grasses and drought tolerance and just being out on the grasslands of eastern Kansas, really fell in love with grasslands and kind of arid ecosystems. After my PhD, I did what's called a postdoc, so postdoctoral experience. That's just a way to get a little more experience before you get a professor job, which is fairly normal now. And I went back to Minnesota, but I was at the Maine University this time in St. Paul. The research I did focused on this project that's pictured here, or this is just one part of the project. It's called BioCon, stands for Biodiversity, Carbon, and Nitrogen Experiment. And it's the largest or longest running biodiversity and climate change experiment in the world. And so what you can see is all of these different plots within this circle. Each plot has a different number of species, so controlling biodiversity. And then these white posts you see that create this ring around those plots, those actually introduce extra CO2 in the air. And so the air around these plants is at an elevated concentration to mimic future climate scenarios. So it can look at how climate change and biodiversity interact to impact the function of plant ecosystems. And then after my postdoc, I got a job here. I did a year postdoc and then landed this job at CSU, and I've been here about 6 years, going into my 6th full year here as a professor. You can see, let me move my face again. You can see my kids have grown. This is actually like a year old. I just spent 20 minutes trying to get new pictures from them, and that didn't go well, so I just used an old picture. We've added to our family. We've got Bear is our Border Collie Husky Golden Retriever mixed dog. And I teach 3 classes generally here. I teach this class, FRS 310. I teach a forest or a plant ecophysiology class at the graduate level. And then I also started teaching NR 220 last summer up at the mountain campus. And this year, of course, was all online. And then my research is really looking at the structure and function of individual plants. So we do, this upper picture is a cross section of a plant leaf or of a grass leaf. And so we do a lot where we look at the structure, the anatomy of leaves, and how that affects their ability to tolerate drought or grow really quickly. And that's what most of my research now is focused on. So that's a snapshot of who I am. Hopefully we'll get to know each other more throughout the semester, so feel free to ask about anything in my life outside of work. That's fine. I think it's fun to get to know each other. So yeah, we'll see you in class soon.